Live, and I am your neighborhood sociologist, Rod Graham. And let me explain to those who come across this on the interwebs what this is about. So, this is my Being series. And in this series, I try to find people who are interesting in their personal lives, but also people who have interesting things to say about the world, about social issues. And my friend Matt here, who just told me how to pronounce his name, and I have forgotten. So I'm not going to pronounce his last name. I can say Matt, of course, but his last name, I want to say it the way that I have been practicing to say it, which was wrong. So I won't. But my friend Matt is here, and we did this in the past, in January, maybe, Matt. And we had some technical issues, and we're doing it again. But I think this time is going to be even more interesting. And he's a really good guy with a lot of interesting things to say. So, Matt, please forgive me, but could you pronounce your name again?
Kappadakunnel.
Kappadakunnel. I'm sorry about that. You just told me that like 5 minutes ago. So,
All good.
yeah. All right. So, yeah, that's what it's about. And this is going to be fun. And I'm just going to jump right into it and ask the first question. Matt, what do you do for fun, man?
Yeah, for fun, other than going on Twitter and, getting into debates, which sometimes can turn into arguments, other than reading or writing on the side, I'd say fitness is what I really do for fun. Fitness in
Mhm.
terms of whether it be weights. Rod and I were just chatting about running. Uh, since I want to say January of this year, a group of us have started doing a Sunday bike ride on the beach, going anywhere from 20 miles round trip. But I'd say my newfound love for that's been fun is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I've always been a fan of martial arts ever since I was a kid, and
Mhm.
as parents go, like mine were afraid to let me explore that. And I remember in high school, the first time I heard about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, especially as brought over by the Gracie family from Brazil, I was just fascinated with it. Then that took on to like UFC and watching UFC and MMA. And then now in my early 40s, I finally got around to taking Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes, and so that's what I actually right before this, that's where I came from. I did an hour class earlier today. I try to go 3 to 4 times a week, and yeah, it's really brought me a lot of fun and energy. And I now in my early 40s, I found something that makes me feel young again, so it's been great.
Wow. I mean, I don't get the fascination with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, but many people that I have spoken with now, including you, really like it. So it's obvious I'm missing something here.
Yeah, I'd say for jujitsu, I'd say even for me, the fascination in my high school, early 20s, it's kind of that macho thing where you want to be the guy to
Hmm.
submit the
Hmm.
other, make him tap out. And actually, now that I'm in jujitsu, it's really more of a discipline of a martial art of defeating the ego, keeping oneself safe, self-control, respect for the other. And so, ironically and interestingly enough, I'm less of a fan of UFC, MMA, and more of a fan of just having that preparedness, readiness, how to keep myself safe in a situation, how to keep someone else safe, how to diffuse a situation so it doesn't escalate. And that's where I really found a lot of giftedness with jujitsu and fellow classmates. It's really just a good crop of people who are coming in good intention. They're very supportive environment. So,
Hmm.
I will say this: 10 years ago, I tried doing going to an MMA school, and what I found was the instructor was mean. We didn't really learn anything. Even as a beginner, it was just, all right, let's go into the mat and start, rolling around and putting people in locks and stuff. I didn't know what I was doing, and I just felt like I saw people getting injured. I just didn't feel it was a safe
Hmm.
environment. So yeah, this is much better where it's a fun, safe environment, fitness oriented, but really just really connecting the mind, the body, and the soul. So yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. Now, do you have any like, do you get injuries from this?
Yes, it's possible. So one thing that is very common is like, you know, guillotine head choke holds and stuff like that. What's really great about the school I go to is there's a lot of discussion about letting the other person know if there's an area of weakness or injuries. So early on, a new guy kind of took my neck and yanked it really quickly, and then for a couple weeks, I just had like really this bad, like, this very sore neck. And so,
Mhm.
and then after that, anytime I'd partner up with someone, I just let them know, hey, we're doing a hold. I'm gonna tap out early. I'm gonna. It's just very sensitive, and everyone's respectful of that. And so, and that not just in the beginner class, but that even goes on in like the black belt classes, where if you get injured, you just let the other person know, hey, there's an area to avoid. And so, yeah, there's that bit of a respect. I mean, I've seen people injure their knees. I've seen people injure like their joints right here. So it's possible. And I
Mhm.
think the focus is just on doing things slow, deliberately, safely, learning the technique, not trying to rush through it, not trying to really make it more about power. Yeah, the nice thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's how to equip someone who's not necessarily the biggest person in the room, how they can defend themselves against someone who's bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic, coming in bad intentions. Um, so as long as the technique is really done in a slow, methodical manner, then injuries can't be prevented, but at least it can be mitigated or somewhat avoided.
Okay. That's pretty good, man. I mean, I love physical activity. I just never got into that. But it is important, I think, especially as you get older, to make sure that you stay physically active. And so, I mean, cool, man. It's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, look, I am really interested in what you have to say here. So first, let me give my little spiel on this. I didn't see my blackness until maybe late 20s. Now, of course, I knew that I was African American, but it was just a weird kind of thing. I grew up in a segregated South. I mean, not legally segregated, but I mean, it was just the town I grew up in. You had the black side and the white side. High school, black kids over here, white kids over here, and because of that, you're just kind of in your own world. You don't really think about the fact that there are other people out there that are different than you, that might see you in a different way. I mean, it just wasn't in the air. And then I went to an HBCU, and it was the same. So ironically, by getting that nurturing, I guess it was good getting that nurturing by being in an environment like that. Um, it was good, but it also meant that it delayed me realizing that there was a world out there that saw me a little bit differently, and my blackness kind of mattered in that world. And plus, I had imbibed this kind of you know imaginary view of color blindness, where it was like, all right, MLK said a lot of nice stuff in the late 60s, and because of that, everything's cool now, so you don't really have to think about it that much. It was a kind of simplistic view of things. So I don't think that way now. And so, you know, I didn't see my blackness. Now, on your end, how was that experience for you?
Yeah, a lot of what you said just resonated with me and my experience. So, I was born in the U.S., born in Louisiana of all places, grew up in Southern California. I'm Catholic by religion. So there are a couple things that differentiate me than someone who's born in India like my parents, or someone who's come over from India, is the term that we used to use, and I don't like using anymore, the fresh off the boat, so to speak.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I wanted to, growing up, wanted to distinguish myself and say, hey, I'm not like one of those people. I'm American. But let's be real. Anyone who would see me, first thing they would see, and first thing they would see you, it's just like, oh, he's brown, he's black, she's this, she's that, and that's the first thing that comes to someone's head. It's almost like I was not, and me reflecting back, I was not seeing my own brownness because I just in my head wanted to be seen as, oh, just like everybody else, just
Mm.
another
Mm.
American. I'm not one of those. And I just, number one, wasn't seeing my brownness, wasn't valuing it, was allowing the culture that was around to inform me. Like, growing up, it was the Simpsons, it was Apu. That was when you get when you get Indians, there's the stereotype. And so kind of wanting to laugh at the stereotype and say, hey, the stereotype's not me, I'm American.
Hmm.
And I was buying into kind of the colorblind myth, where I just wanted to be seen not by the color of my skin. I just wanted to be seen, hey, I'm just like everyone else, I'm American. The reality is, let's be real. Yeah, we that's the first thing we notice about someone else, and it's not to say, hey, I'm brown, I'm ashamed of being brown, but hey, I'm brown, I want to celebrate who I am, celebrate the culture that I have. As I've gotten over the years, really been able to appreciate my Indian identity, my Indian Christian or Indian Catholic identity, the fact that I'm Indian American, so it's this bicultural hybrid of families from India, but I grew up in the U.S., and so I'm not quite. The people in India don't see me as Indian. The people in America don't see me as American. So it's that weird, strange tension. But I would say me not seeing my own brownness gave me this false sense of privilege where I wasn't able to see the other, especially whether it be migrant populations from south of the border trying to come over, and just seeing myself as different than or better than. And why are these
Hmm.
people trying to come over like that? Why can't they go the legal route like my parents did? So, and then that extends to where I'm not seeing my own brownness, and I can't really appreciate the struggles of people who are black and brown, who are people of color. And I just kind of go back to, oh, look, I was able to do well. I studied, I worked hard. Why can't
Hmm.
these people? So it's just falling into those same myths. And, whether it was, I mean, I think for me and for a lot of people, the death of George Floyd really awakened us all to racial injustice, and then it also alerted me to my own brownness and how I've failed in my to myself and to my fellows who are black and brown and people of color, and not expressing that solidarity and oneness. And so it was, I would say, even using Christian language or religious language, a bit of a conversion experience for me to see
Hmm.
anew, see my from my blindness about, see for myself in my own brownness, see the other, the color that they have, recognize term called white privilege, and how there is privilege, and how, there's areas where I am definitely not a beneficiary. And interesting enough, I was just finished a book named White Christian Privilege, and recognizing that intersectionality. While as a brown person I don't have certain privileges, but as a Catholic person, coming from a Catholic Christian faith, there is a certain sense of having, being part of that greater sense of American Christian culture, where the American Christian culture is the assumed norm. Like, there's Christmas, there's Santa Claus,
Hmm.
there's
Hmm.
Easter,
Yep.
there's
Yep. Yep.
Easter
Yep.
eggs.
That's
And so,
true. Hmm.
even despite my brownness and there being a sense of being less than or not having privilege, there is, on the flip side, a sense of privilege in being part of that American mainstream culture. So it's been eye opening just to see, first off, my own brownness, how even that Catholic Christian identity can be a wedge to distinguish myself in terms of brownness, and but I'm acceptable in herein. But if I'm really true to that Catholic Christian background, it would it would bring me back to the people who are being marginalized, the people who are being treated as less than, the people who are being pushed out of society, and how I'm not better than, I'm actually one with. So it's been an eye-opening experience.
Okay. Let me push back. Just to play the devil's advocate here. Um, Someone may say, look, if you would simply not think about these issues and not focus on them so much, it wouldn't be a problem. Like you're generating an issue here with all this race stuff, right? Like, don't, I mean, they wouldn't say ignorance is bliss, the person making this argument, because that sounds kind of like, okay, you're telling someone to be stupid. But the idea is that if you don't focus on those things, then it won't affect you so much. And how do you respond to that?
Yes, it was actually funny. It was in a podcast, video cast several months ago, where I learned the term race essentialism, where the speaker,
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
that
remember this.
who's
Yeah.
actually African American, said, "Isn't that a race essentialist issue?" And I had to just, in my own ignorance, just had to, can you define that? I've never heard of that term before.
Mhm.
What's What's really interesting is what is failed to realize is that there is an unconscious bias that we all have, an implicit and unconscious bias. And even if we can try to intellectually break through of like, oh, you're not just your color. It's like, no, there's a lot of formed ideas from early childhood, from our societal background that seep so deeply beyond our conscious level. And if we ignore that, we only give it more power. In fact, the way to break free of it is actually to go from to not leave it in the unconscious, but bring it into consciousness and reflection. And I know for me, that's how I've been able to move from kind of a racial indifference to more anti-racism,
Mhm.
which has actually given me a greater sense of not only solidarity with those who are marginalized, including myself, but really I would say a truer sense of living my Christian faith, a truer sense of adherence to the gospel values. And yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of people who just say, oh, well, if we just ignore our differences,
Mhm.
like
Yep,
we
yep, yep.
can't ignore our differences. It's like our whether it be our biological nature is to discern and to see differences and to see similarities. I mean, if we want to go back to hunter gatherers, we got to be able to distinguish. So
Mhm.
yeah, no, consciously, unconsciously, I'm gonna see a person and I'm gonna identify them and categorize them based on my upbringing, my conscious and unconscious traits or unconscious formations. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
we can
That's
pretend,
true.
but it's we got to grow up from make believe.
Yes, yes, I think so. A lot of folks, they like to critique this implicit association test, IAT test, and say, well, it doesn't hold up empirically, or oh, this doesn't work, or something. Okay, fine. And what I'm getting to is what you're saying is that we've kind of evolved, or as humans, we categorize people. We do. And so the implicit association test is meant to kind of tap into that, but you don't need that. Any psychologist, social psychologist who studies human cognition will tell you that, yeah, we need categories to navigate our world, and we put people into categories, and anything into categories. Actually, we're categorizing machines. And so, I mean, there's no way around it. You're absolutely right. You can act surfacely or verbally say, that I don't see color, or we can just ignore it. But on the inside, you're actually absolutely making decisions based on the race, the gender, how a person dresses, all those things, the beauty of the person. I mean, you're just doing it, right? And so, yeah, it's better to put those things out into the open. I got to tell you, to me, this kind of so I'll go back to my own experiences of being a colorblind person. I wrote this piece called "The Colorblind Racist," and the idea was that I was a colorblind racist, and that I was trying to be colorblind, but because I didn't want to see how color impacted people, I could only ever come to the conclusion that it was those people's fault that they were the way they are. In other words, I didn't want to look at policy. I didn't want to say that there's discrimination, there's any of that stuff. So if you move all those things and you see one group, and this is in South Carolina, here doing well economically, and another group not doing well, in the absence of racism, discrimination, explanations, you have to say, well, something's wrong with these folks, right? Like that's the only way. So I
Hmm.
and I've always kicked myself, not always. In the past couple of years, I've kicked myself for how I was thinking back in my mid to late 20s. But now look, this was new to me, Matt. Here, um, I read how in a piece you wrote, and correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't have it in front of me, but I read it when I put these questions together. That you were apolitical, and maybe still are a little bit, but you have in the past sometimes voted for the Republican presidential candidate. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this was my Medium blog. I wrote the title of the piece was "I am a political," and then in quotes, "none," None. I'm a political none. So there's
Okay.
a term used for religious or versus non-religious of being among the nuns, the Nones, where they don't ascribe to a certain church, but they're spiritual, not religious. They might practice, karma, yoga, just treat others the
Hmm.
way they want to be treated. But so I felt I ascribed myself to be a political none, where I don't really feel like I ascribe to either of the two major parties. Um, and then even taking a step back, I even struggle with the term apolitical because as human beings, and as Aristotle says, we're political creatures. We're societal, so we're part of the polis or the society. So I really even can't call myself apolitical. I have to have some sort of uh, participation in
Oh,
society.
that's a good point. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
But in terms of the
Hmm.
two-party system, I just can't call myself a fan or follower or either really corresponding with my beliefs, values, whether it be political or otherwise. And growing up, Catholic Christian faith, there's a lot of alignment with the Republican Party of values in terms of anti-abortion, how marriage and between man and woman. So that was just my upbringing, and that's where my my church informed my politics from kind of you know before the age of voting to age of 18 and onward starting to vote. In fact, I remember when I did like a quiz when I turned 18, like which political candidate would I align most with. And at the time, it was I think it was still a Republican primary, so I aligned more with McCain than I did with George W. Bush. So found that interesting. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, it was just kind of that was just my upbringing, even to the extent of, and kind of alluded to this earlier, but even to the extent of not understanding migration from south of the border. So people coming over from Mexico, Central America, South America, I would think, well, why are they coming? If they're coming illegally, then they're breaking the law and they shouldn't be. And so there should be tougher border constraints. Why can't they be like my parents who went through the proper channels and came over here legally? But I realized, and part of it was I spent some time on border towns and seeing and meeting people who were trying to come over the border, understanding their stories, understanding they're not here to, get get handouts. They're here
Mhm.
because if they stay in their village in Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, they could die. They could be murdered. Their families are starving. They have no means of money. So they got to make a very risky, expensive journey to come to the U.S. to be in a situation where they're not going to be murdered or any
Mhm.
sort of threat of life, and or be able to find ways to earn money and send back home or provide for a family in the US. So seeing issues like that where really took a step back, and while early on my church informed my politics and I really got
Mhm.
deeper in my Catholic Christian faith and said, well, wait a second, is don't the people who are coming over, don't they have dignity, and they're coming over for actually very um, very humanitarian reasons. They're not here to they're not rapists, they're not murderers, they're just people actually avoiding being raped and being murdered if they stayed in an area where a cartel is having control of the village, for instance. So it really kind of took me away from, all right, there are aspects of the Republican Party that don't align with my values, especially when Donald Trump came to the scene. Like, okay, fine, I voted for McCain in 2008. I voted for Romney in 2012. I think part of it was,
You didn't even like Obama, Matt. Oh man,
well, here's the funny
come
thing: when
on.
when Obama came to the scene, at first I was like, who is this person? He has no background. He's so young. I thought he's a great speaker, but he's an orator. He knows how to speak. He knows how to say things, but what's really
Okay,
behind that?
okay.
I want someone with experience. So yeah, that led me to McCain, and then it led me to Romney, and of course, Romney too. It was kind of like, you know, party of values. Romney is successful business person with Bain Capital, and me having a finance background, I saw a lot of connection there. But
Mhm.
then you look at, once Trump came to the scene, it was that Republican Party did a whole flip flop where it turned from its set of values and became very much a party, really wing focus, very alt right focus, very much white American focus,
It's really
and which
something what happened.
it's crazy where
I,
they all just kind of became the party of Trump, where I mean, we could even look at the January 6th hearings where there's no sense of independence and objectivity in terms of
mm,
examining the facts. it's truly sad. And even some Republican leaders who were very critical of Trump, just seeing the way they've just gone to the other extreme. It's kind of
Yep,
the
yep,
point
yep.
where since Trump and thereafter, it's been a two parties that cannot really reach across the aisle or come to any sort of consensus, and there's this very widening divide. You might know the story as well, but at the time of Reagan, the Speaker of the House was a Democrat, and despite having such political difference, they knew how to work together. The joke
Yep,
was they would
yep, yep,
be
yep.
able to, go to the pub afterwards and have a few drinks and have some laughs. Whereas we can't see that with our current system. It's truly just a polarized system, and it doesn't seem to be a system that can move away from, which I don't really see this as boding well for the country, both now
No,
and to the future.
no, it's not. Look, I got to tell you, man, I have that exact same sentiment. And if you express that, at least online, right, on Twitter, people get mad at you. They
Oh
don't
yes,
like the fact that you want to depolarize things or that you want to find commonality. They go, oh, this is what is it, both sidesism
yes,
or something. And I'm like, well, yeah, sometimes that can be problematic, but come on, we live in this country together, and we got to figure out how to come together on things. And like, no, there's no compromise. They're all bigots. This kind of outrageous thing. I'm like, no, they're not. And I'm sure on the right that same thing happens. I'm just not in those spaces. I'm sure on the right, if some conservative person says, look, guys, they're just interested in making sure that we treat black people. No, this is racial essentialism. Some crazy thing. You're communist. How you dare say you want to treat people like. So anyway, it's a problem. I agree. And your assessment, which I think you were saying that they've moved further to the right and really went all in on Trump. I see that, and I find that to be very, very unfortunate. Very, very much so. I mean, why do you think that happened?
it's really bizarre. I think Trump and that mindset tapped into a lot of emotions, and it's really been kind of a place where they've gotten their stronghold, where it's beyond reasoning, it's beyond compromise, it's beyond kind of a higher mindset, intellectual. Let's figure things out. It's really kind of gone, beneath the surface to real people's pain. Let's just say white Americans' pain and feeling that sense of replacement and sense of
Yeah, yeah,
privileges
yeah.
being taken away, and so it's just they don't want to they don't want that change without a fight. And it seemed like the Republican Party has kind of realized, wow, we need to tap into this for us to survive and continue. And I'll even say, look, I even on the flip side, like I'm not totally impressed with the way our country's been going. This current establishment, this current regime. It's I think many of us were just wanted anyone but the last guy, and we're just happy
Hmm.
that that was the case. But you know, hasn't been to that negative extreme, no. But it wasn't like it was like 180 degrees, such a much better situation. It just seems, and that's why I just can't align myself with the Democratic Party. I just feel like there's really a lot more old school bureaucracy, say things but don't do things.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
that's
Okay.
taking
Hmm.
place, and I think the Democratic Party is just very polarized in and of itself, where you have kind of the establishment regime, and then you got the AOC Bernie regime, and then you got people in between, and then you got like the Joe Manchins of the world who were like, wait a second, are you really blue? You're looking kind of red. So yeah, I think it's just all kind of a weird mess. Like I think think it shouldn't be a party system. It should just be people with good platforms and people who can do the job. And yeah, I think the whole party system, maybe it made sense in 1700s or whatever, but I think it's not needed now.
Those founding fathers, at least most of them, hated the idea of parties. They knew this time was coming. They knew it. And you're right. Maybe we don't need parties. Maybe at one time in a non-networked world where things were very hierarchical, you kind of needed some sort of organization to marshal votes and organize things and tell people what everything was. You don't need that now. People don't need to be told by their local party leader what's happening or something like that. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Um, Unlike you, I am all in for the Democrats. Even though you're right, this particular our current leader is a little tepid. I'll just put it like that. But I'm certainly all in on the Democrats, at least for the time being. Although I have some pretty conservative views. In fact, I think I'm to the right of you when it comes to immigration. But but for practical reasons, yeah, my vote always goes to the left.
And I'll even say this: it's funny. My earlier assessment of President Obama versus once Trump came to the scene, then I realized, wow, Obama was actually pretty good. I mean, at least he was had a better head on his shoulders. He was a
Yeah,
cooler
yeah, yeah.
temperament, and it's funny how I was just looking back, like, wow, well, maybe I was in certain respects I was wrong about him, and yeah, so it's good how we grow and we learn, we evolve.
Yeah, yeah. All right, now let's say, Matt, you've run, your 5K, and you did your 20-mile bike ride. You did all that, and then you said, you know what the heck, I'm going to do some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and you did that, and then you come home and say, man, I'm starving, and I don't want to go out and get anything. So what are you ordering from Grubhub?
Grubhub, and it's funny. So I think we were chatting about this earlier. Yeah, there was a point in the pandemic where I was really doing very well in terms of fitness, and then there was a point where it went to the other extreme. We had our second baby. He got wasn't able to work out as much, and gyms were
Mhm.
closed. So it finally wasn't until late last year where I started getting back into running, realize, wow, only way I can lose weight is to go running. Well, I wasn't able to do a whole lot of a decent distance, no more than like half a mile, 1 mile. It's because I was at a point of heaviness where it would hurt my knees to run too much, and so it was kind of like this weird chicken or the egg. Like I need to
Mhm.
run to lose weight, but then I'm a bit heavy to really run effectively. So it just dawned on me, well, what if I just figure out a way to change up the diet, eat less, and heard about intermittent fasting, started implementing a version of that, and just found, wow, I actually can cut down what I need to eat, and I actually feel great, if not better. And it was a mindset where, oh, I needed to eat this much for breakfast, this much for lunch, this much for dinner. And then when I realized, well, I don't need that much anymore, then I actually got to the point where I was able to increase my metabolism, stay fit. That's all to say, if I'm feeling like I wanted to eat healthy, say my couple areas that I would go, if there's a healthy version of a buffalo chicken, I love buffalo, anything. I love chicken Caesar salad. So if I'm going the
A
healthier route,
healthy version of buffalo chicken. They make that?
there's like one place where they do like a gluten-free breading. Yeah, white
Okay.
all white meat chicken breast. So yeah, there's that. I love Mediterranean food, but if I just eat what I really want to eat, that'd be all right. The fried buffalo chicken wings and fries. It would be. Um, I love New York style pizza if I can get
Mhm,
a good New
mhm.
York style pizza. I love just fried chicken, hot and spicy, like a Nashville hot. So yeah, there's kind of like, it depends which way I'm going. If I'm going healthy, trying to stay fit, to all right, I need to have a little cheat meal, then yeah, if I when I find a good New York pizza, I'm in heaven.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I'm not a pizza guy. In fact, I'm not
Lucky.
even a I mean, I don't know how I guess it's because when I grew up, there was not a McDonald's in my town until maybe I was in junior high, and I didn't go to a McDonald's and buy something until maybe high school, almost end of high school. Like everything was at home. Like when I say I'm a country boy, I was really a country boy. So everything was at home. Everything was at home, and so I never developed this kind of eat out kind of ethic, So I just feel weird spending this much on something that I can just buy it for that much and then cook it at home or something. Plus, I feel like I can cook better the way that I want it at home. But if I was gonna get something from Grubhub, it might be some chicken wings. I love chicken wings. I really do. with different flavors. I like to dabble. Garlic parmesan, and then like flaming hot, and then plain just have it all around. So I mean, that might be my thing too. I mean, you know what, man? You're like the third or fourth person who's got this Brazilian jiu-jitsu intermittent fasting thing going. Like, what the heck is going on? It's like a virus spreading through the population.
It's
John
funny,
Pike, if you're
yeah.
watching this, I'm talking about you. You're one of them.
Yeah, it's funny. Like at first I thought, oh, what a dumb idea, intermittent fasting. It sounds like a fad. And then I started trying it and realized, wow, I can actually put off eating until closer to 10, 11 a.m. and just eat what would be kind of like a late breakfast, early lunch, and not necessarily eat the size of the meal that I would for breakfast plus lunch, something that'd be a lot smaller. And by the time I got to dinner, I actually didn't eat something very big, and just try not to eat past a certain time, and then just let the metabolism kick in. And once I started doing it, realizing, wow, I have this ability to do that. I don't need to eat the way I've been doing before. I just felt better. So the other thing I will say is another thing we learned in the pandemic, as everyone did, it was the all the delivery apps in terms of getting food and whatnot, and we just saw how much we were spending on that versus grocery shopping. And so we had to switch that equation where we did more grocery shopping. I will say, I mean, Trader Joe's, we have one across the street that's been a lifesaver, where you can get their orange chicken. It tastes better than like a Panda Express orange chicken, and that feeds their $5 orange chicken feeds the whole family. Whereas you go to Panda Express, you got to spend probably, I don't know, 20-30 bucks to feed a whole family. So
Yeah,
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 we're doing more of the cooking thing too.
yeah. And it's so. I mean, I posted something on Twitter where I was ordering from this Korean. It was wings, Korean place called Bonchon Chicken, and the chicken was like $18 or something. But the total price was like $40 or
Oh
something like
no.
that. I was like, man, this is crazy. I mean, why am I spending? I'm like, no, this is nuts. There's no way that I'm doing this more. I think I ordered that night because I was hungry. But otherwise, I'm like, nah, this is crazy. This just costs too much to
I'll
order
tell
at
you.
Grubhub.
I'll tell you this. I was in Western Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago. It's where my wife's family's from, and one night we decided, oh, let's. We didn't want to cook, so we were like, all right, let's get wings. Let's get wings from like a local place. I was shocked. So 3 different orders of 20-piece wings, so 60 wings, ended up costing almost $100. I'm like,
This
I
is
didn't know it was.
insane, man.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't understand that model. Obviously, it's working because people are doing it. But why would someone? I mean, you must be so. It's like you have to be so desperate to do that on the regular, or have a lot of money. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it could be that.
Like after that, I said, when we go back, we're not getting wings from there ever again.
Yeah. All right. Now, a little serious here. You have written about being sexually harassed during an interview by a priest. What happened?
Yeah, a little background here. So in 2008, I was applying to be a member, a seminarian or so, member of the religious order known as the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, which are they're known for their many universities like Georgetown, Boston College, Creighton University, my alma mater, any of the Loyolas. Anyways, so part of the process is to write an autobiography, have interviews, usually with four Jesuit priests. Sometimes it's they might have like another person, like a non-ordained person, be the interviewer. But anyway, so again, this was 2008, 2009. Our say our collective understanding, my understanding of boundaries when it comes to sexual type of discussion talk. I think for all of us, it was became more front of mind and accelerated in with the Me Too movement. And so yeah, there's a lot that I just didn't expect, didn't know. So going to interview with this priest. By the way, just as a side note, I had a really bad dream last night, and this priest was there. So it's funny how the unconscious works, or maybe it
Mm,
was just kind of like back of
yeah,
the mind. I knew I'd be talking about this in this situation, and that's why I had that bad dream. But Yeah, we're pause. Uh, all right, we still there?
Yes.
All right, let me. Something happened there. Let me. Something happened to my screen. All right, so yeah, we're in the process of the interviewing, and one of the questions that does come up in interviewing for any sort of, whether going to seminary or going to religious life, is, they're having people who are committing to celibacy, so they want to make sure, all right, is this going to be right for that person? Both, is this right for the person? Is this going to be a good fit for the organization? So they want to know a person's sexual history, what's their experience, and so there are questions that I was prepared for, but what I wasn't prepared for, but it was almost like I was in like a frame of mind of answer the questions, do what they ask you, because I
Mhm.
wanted to get into the order. So he started really probing a lot in terms of, oh, who is it that you first had sex with? Where was it? And then it started getting to questions of what kind of positions and what nationality was she? And it was just
Wow.
like, whoa, it's like, why do you need to know all this
Yeah,
information?
no, too personal.
And this is like 28-year old me versus 4-year-old me, reflecting on it and thinking, yeah, there was a lot here that was inappropriate.
Mhm,
But it wasn't
mhm.
until I was reading an article about how it's not just um, the underage who are abused and experience misconduct from priests and religious or people from church backgrounds, but it's something that happens to those who are adults. So when I was
Mhm.
thinking about this experience, I thought, wow, it was almost like it was a flashback and realizing, wow, my current consciousness of what's considered crossing the boundaries in terms of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, juxtaposed with that experience from 2008, realizing, wow, there were several red flags, several things that need to be called out. So yes, I wrote an article. I actually wrote two articles about it. I wrote
Mhm.
one article, and then before that, the second article was published. I actually did report it to the archdiocese and to the order.
Hmm.
And the way it worked was, and this is again me in retrospect, they have someone assigned to me to investigate the matter. There's a discussion about it. They hired this independent investigator who's got a former law enforcement background. They asked me a lot of detailed questions. Then they apparently basically pull the priest out of ministry. They don't tell him why. Then that same law enforcement person interviews that priest, asks him, they're trying to really make it so that he won't really know what's going on, or what's the accusation, why. Um,
Mhm.
Really, in retrospect, this is a independent investigator hired by the order. There's a committee of people who review the findings, also appointed by the order. Let's be real, it wasn't truly independent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was
Okay.
more of a fact-finding mission. All right, is this something that could really damage us? And if so, we need to get in front of it. Is this something that won't damage us? Well, we can just write it off. And it turned out the situation was the latter, where it was just his word against my word, and it literally just came down to, well, we decided that because there was no evidence to support what you're saying. Like, what evidence am I going to find? You think I was going to bring a video recorder or a tape
Right,
recorder to
right,
that interview?
right. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it was just, and I thought it was just handled poorly. Like, one would think by this time, with the church and all its scandals, it would have grown and learned and done better. But I would say what it really learned to do is cover itself better, or do the appearance of trying to do the
Oh,
right thing,
interesting. Interesting.
but really just trying to cover itself better. So I'd say they really fell short. Um, I I would say the good thing about the experience is, kind of, again, going back from unconsciousness to consciousness, is bringing this forth to consciousness, seeking justice, really allowed me to be more at peace with the experience. It was a bad experience. I was a bad priest. Really
Mhm.
shouldn't be in ministry, but at the end of the day, that experience doesn't have as much power over me as it once did. So I wrote a second article, really just kind of calling out the order for its failure to really demonstrate accountability and really do real justice for the victim. So yeah, that made rounds and Catholic media actually made more of a positive, was more receptive, let's just say, in conservative right wing Catholic media, because you got the Jesuits who are more of a seen as more of a leftist or left wing order. So the right wing Catholic media is like, oh yeah, look. First off, right wing Catholic media is they definitely don't like the sexual abuse crisis, but especially don't like the Jesuits. So it's kind of like
Oh,
two
that's
two birds with one stone.
interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, they really gravitated to it. But yeah, it's, and if anything, it just having that experience helps me understand anyone else who's experienced, whether it be sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, from whether it be from within the church or in, outside the church, and
Mhm,
interpersonal
mhm.
relationships or in a work setting. So it's just mind boggling though. Like I'm thinking about all the training I've got to do for work in terms of sexual harassment, knowing the company's sexual misconduct policies. And I would find most organizations, if not all, are have better protocols than Catholic institutions do, and it's really tragic.
Hmm.
And which are the ones that are actually getting in trouble for misconduct? Well, at least secular organizations have, in my opinion, a better protocol, a better working working system.
That's interesting. Well, for a lot of these cases, as far as I understand it, the public only hears about those that gain traction. But most of them are like in your case, where you make a complaint and then it gets investigated internally, and of course there's not going to be any physical evidence or anything, so it becomes a he said she said. And the only time those things kind of get out, if it's somebody well known, or maybe that person says something publicly, and then you get like five or six, because there's usually a pattern to this thing, so five or six people saying, yeah, that same thing happened, and then it becomes an issue. But most of the time it just goes away, unfortunately.
Hmm.
You know, yeah, yeah. Well, you know what, man? I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the policies and practices and the norms of the Catholic Church. I mean, I grew up Protestant, and I don't even know there's a Catholic church in my town. So I mean, it just wasn't a part. I just saw it on TV. But it's just really interesting. But I've spoken now with quite a few Catholic people, and it's really interesting, that dynamic where a lot of this is coming out, and but you still have to find a way to sort of live within that system and practice your faith. It's really something. I don't think there's a comparable thing like that within Protestant churches. Wait a minute, except I'm rambling a little bit, but maybe this prosperity gospel type thing, maybe people are starting to say, look, you know what, these people here with these jets traveling around, and their parishioners are giving all of their money and tithes to them, is kind of wrong. But other than that, it's just interesting to see it play out in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, and I'm blanking on the names, but there are some very well-renowned Protestant church institutions that had some recent upheaval regarding sexual abuse, sexual
Mm.
misconduct.
Hmm.
Anything from the pastor being very much outspoken, against homosexuality, and then come to find out he's caught
Oh, I've
with,
seen some of those
with
stories.
a
Yeah, yeah,
male
yeah, yeah.
prostitute, or
Hmm.
or some sort of male sex worker, um, to someone like what's his name, Jared, that Falwell guy, who the Falwell son, who was part of that, big Trump supporter, part of that. Is it Liberty University? It's one of those universities.
That's Liberty University. Yep, yep, yep.
Yes, and he got in trouble for, some things that were that became public on social media and other things, and it's just interesting where there's a lack of consistency between, quote unquote morals, values, faith, and one's lifestyle. Just, all right, if that's the way you want to live, just be honest about it and don't be hypocritical about it.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Hmm.
it's, and we're all weak people. None of us are perfect, but when they're operating from a framework of these are our church moral values, and we adhere to them, and we're superior in this way, and then come to find out, no, not necessarily, then, you know get caught with their pants down, then
Hmm.
that's when they get in trouble.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. Okay, brother. Let's end it here. What are you working on now?
Yes, a few different things. One is in March of this year, I signed a book deal with Paulus Press. They're a Catholic media press, and on a book that's encompassing the Catholic Church, Catholic spirituality, and racial justice. So it's topics that are very, very dear to me. Looking at even the early church writers, where there was such an emphasis on the dignity of the human person, and the nature of the Catholic Church is a universal church of being multicultural, being various ethnicities. But then when we see how the church is played out, especially in the American church, how it's very much gravitated toward a white American Catholic Church, there's a huge disconnect with the faith and how it's being lived out, and so that's kind of the areas I'm meaning to hit, and so that's one major thing that I'm working on, and then I've U.S. Catholic. I've been they've been very gracious with me. I'm doing several book reviews for them. A couple I need to work on and finish the books. Got to work on and submit. Got a few articles in the pipeline, so that keeps me busy amid chasing after two kids who are under 5 years old and working a full-time job. So, and doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and
Yes,
whatnot.
you're a very busy man. It's
Try to
very
sleep
good.
every now and then.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Matt, you know what? So the first one didn't go through. We had a little technical difficulties. This one was better. I really enjoyed it, man. I mean, and I got to learn more about you as a person, and you're even more interesting now than before. And I hope that we can do it again. Maybe every 6 months or so, we can kind of sit down and chat.
Love it. And then maybe in 6 months, I'm still doing jiu-jitsu, and maybe by then I'm onto a different belt. Who knows? But yeah, I love doing this. Thank you again, Rod.
All right, take care, man.
You too.